Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality and is about discovering your place in this great universe from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guest, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you here with us this evening. Tonight, we are going to be talking about what is our life experience all about, where we've come, what we've been through, how we're exploring, how we are settling in to say this is a story of my lifetime. If we look back at past generations, everyone had a story of their lifetime, and each one has brought us to today in the year 2024. Now people are saying, I need to connect deeper. I need to know more about my life. I want to explore about my soul, my spirit, perhaps my inner child. Where did I come from? What did I miss? Perhaps maybe what do I need to find to take the next step into an expanded awareness, a soul journey, or perhaps be able to say, I want you to step into the path of an expanded consciousness. I want to live a greater, spiritual, engaging life. Isn't that where we are now? If we look back at many decades, that was not where they were. They were thinking about survival. They were thinking about the next day. They were thinking about how they can expand in their time and place. Today, my guest is Ramaa Krishnan. Her book is The Yoga of Self-Love, The Sacred Path to Wholeness and Healing Through Inner Child Work. And what we'll be talking about today is how do we unfold in this present time? How are we unfolding and finding more questions and answers and saying, is this what I'm looking for? Is that which I seek? And will this help me see going forward how we can really become in a more engaged community, expand our world, and learn more of each other? Ramaa, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Dr. Jeanette. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so glad to have you to talk about this topic today because so many times people will say, but that person, they're too spiritual. They've got the story going on and it's different than mine. Many times people will say, I'm just trying to survive each day. Still others will say, I'm locked into the stories that I've been given at birth. Don't you think all of these concepts right now is where everybody in this world is really going about, and we're all coming to a point of, oh dear, everybody is different, perhaps?
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that is what is meant by the age of the divine feminine, where we begin to realize that nature, because the divine feminine is nature, and nature has created everyone to be different. And I think it is time for us at this time in the evolution of humanity to recognize our difference, to own it, not in a way that makes us special, but isolates us from everyone, but in a way that we find our place in the world in which, by which we can contribute to each other's lives in our own unique way with what we bring to the table.
I've always spoken about the yin and the yang symbol on the show, and many will say we need to find a point of balance, or we need to all come together in this kind of kumbaya moment. And I said the yin and the yang symbol was never meant to be gray. It was never meant to be meshed together. We were never to be able to all be one in the same story, and just as you shared, we were all meant to be the tapestry of the moment in time. So if everybody is in these different aspects, don't you think perhaps we have kind of gotten to the point of dishonoring everyone's kind of like, oh, I'm sticking my peg up today because I hurt. I'm sticking it up because my relationship isn't working. I'm sticking my other peg up because, I'm not able to put food on the table. And we're dishonoring everybody's story.
Very, very well said. Yes, indeed. We do have, all of us, our own facts of life, and then there are the stories we build around it, Mm-hmm. Our facts are all different, and we can't change the facts. But the stories, are those stories that we are carrying with us, stories that lift ourselves and others up? Or are they stories that, like you said at the beginning, a story that was just handed down to me? I don't even know when I started telling myself this story, but
right.
I think there comes a point in our life when we find ourselves stuck. It's like a car that's stuck and it will not move until you change something vital. In that,
mm-hmm.
I think, our life very often, and that's what my book is about, it's about a time when I found myself stuck. And I realized that I could not get myself unstuck until I got back to those stories I was telling myself about the facts of my life. And as I changed those stories, it's almost like you change the battery of your car.
Mm-hmm.
The car has a new life and it starts moving again. And the stories we tell ourselves, really, they are like the battery of that car, that vehicle that we are, each one of us.
I've shared, I think, probably for the past 15 years that really humanity has been on the essence of from the 3D to the 5D. We think about that. We also think about the time when we are gone from human to a spirituality or to our essence or to our philosophical life. But in essence, really, where we are in this decade at this time is we are on the bridge. We are pretty much, as you share in your book about the story of midlife transition, I always liken it back to being on the bridge, because that which was all before, it will all come up. It will have to rise. We will need to say goodbye to it. We will need to honor it. The stories of the past. Yes, well, I've been through this. I've been through that. And can I let it go? And, my mother this, my father that. And then we go to the other side and we realize all that can go through that door, just as I share with my patients, is when you go through that door, all of the story goes. It goes away. And when you're on the other side of the bridge, there's only essence. There's only energy.
Yeah.
So do you think perhaps maybe we are on the bridge, and you said about being stuck, maybe you're just on one leg of that bridge, and you're just saying, I need to keep going because it does bring me to that which the collective we are all trying to find. And what are we all trying to find? It's just our way through the mist. So really everyone is on the bridge right now, perhaps.
Very true. And you know what you said about 3D to 5D, right?
Mm-hmm.
3-dimensional to 5-dimensional. I look at it because, as you saw from my book, I look at everything in terms of the chakras. Mm-hmm. So we are moving from, so to use it in my language and say the same thing that you said, we are moving from a third chakra way of living to a fifth chakra way of living. Now, third chakra is, all about, and it's important. Don't get me wrong. Nothing is unimportant.
Right.
Third chakra is about ego. It's about free will. It's about what you can control and, the courage to change what I can. Now, fifth chakra is more about the soul. And the soul is, yes, I can't control certain things, and I have to accept it. And I have to trust what I cannot change. And I have to work with what I cannot change. And that is the fifth dimension or fifth chakra awareness that we are being called towards. And it requires us to really sift through what can be changed and what must be accepted in order to move from that bridge that we are stuck on because we kept thinking that we were either victims or we kept thinking that we are supposed to get control, whatever the stories of the third chakra are. We have to be able to unpack and release the stories of the third chakra so that we can make it over the bridge, across the bridge to the fifth chakra, the fifth dimension.
I think also, too, the idea that when you talk about the word, the beginning of transformation, I think about transformation, energy in motion. And we think about it, have we ever actually had a beginning or an end? I think we are just now experiencing that now we need to open our eyes to that energy shift. When we say about letting go of things, I think really our history and our concept of the words and the alphabet and how we take those letters and form them into story is really what's held many back in the past. You know, we say, oh, well, your ancestors did this, so you're going to follow that. Or you're a good daughter to do this for your mother. Or you're going to be this because no one ever else has done it in the lineage, and you're going to be the first one. So really our concept of story is truly what seems to be the inhibiting factor in many. I know for myself, I don't operate from story. I don't see it. I don't see labels or genders and all this other stuff. And it's like when I meet someone, it's just I sense their energy. And it's like I could go up to the most important person in the entire universe and just say hello and then with their first name and see their soul. Not having to say, this is blah, 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 this is what they've done. I don't need all of that. So I think in essence, do you think perhaps we are now just sifting through all of kind of I just had a glimmer of this vision. We're all sitting down at these tables with all these stacks of paper, and some's going into the shredder, some's going onto the floor. We might be keeping a little list, perhaps?
Yeah. I agree with you. And, when you talk about stories, many of them are multi-generational, Sometimes a single word can be a story, like, you're a good daughter. What's a good daughter? There's a story in that. A good daughter does this and this and this. Or, my grandmother, she would also, when, I remember as a teenager going through a tough time, and I would tell my grandmother, and she would say, well, that's your karma. You got to suffer it. So that karma is become another story. And what does that story say? That story says, you got it coming to you because you've done something in the past, and now you got it coming to you, and you simply got to suffer it. You see, that was the story in that single word. And I think that for many of us, we inherited these stories. You see, this came in our inheritance. And then for me, I definitely know the word karma is such an inheritance from my family, from my culture. And I still love the idea of karma, but I had to, like you said, unpack it and put some parts into the shredder. No, it's not an invitation for me to suffer. It's not a punishment for the past. It's definitely an invitation to see, to take responsibility, to respond differently, and to use it as a growth opportunity. So that's where I start to move forward along the bridge that you're talking about. But it is these inherited stories from culture, from family, from nature. Some of them I think I was born with. Genetic imagination is in my DNA. And unless I unpack and I really choose, I don't want to be like this anymore. I don't want this to be continuing. I want to retire this. Unless we take that very strong determination and effort to do that, these stories can become self-fulfilling prophecies and keep us in the loop of what the Eastern teachers call samsara, the cycle of birth and death, That's just never ending.
When I shared on the show, when I first started 15 years ago, I would always say that we truly are like a ball of glitter. That's our soul essence. And I picture it as we're kind of like spinning in the universe, and we have kind of fragments that make up our glitter from our past lives, or wherever our soul has been before, because it is eternal. And we go on this trajectory, and all of a sudden we intersect another tether line in the universe. And that tether line is an ancestral lineage. In other words, where other souls are kind of like marching along this tether line. And we intersect it as when we are born. So when we are born, we're kind of download in our head that Rolodex of where all of those ancestral lineages and fragments have been. And then we kind of take it upon as ourself. And we believe that is the self. what you and I are truly talking about today in your book, The Yoga of Self-Love, is truly about unpacking that and saying, that's just the ancestral lineage that I intersected to be able to be in this form as a human being. What the I am is, and this is really this is a miraculous moment of our life that we can even conceive of these thoughts, is that we are saying, no, I am the eternal soul and spirit, and I want to go back to that. So I'm going to start letting go of these tether lines. Isn't
Absolutely.
that, such that is such the, it is such a, it is, I don't even have words for it because it's so profound in the way in which we can see our world and in our essence, perhaps?
So true. And, as I mentioned in the book, one of the big teaching, I won't say moments, it's more like years, was through the Bhagavad Gita. And the Gita talks about the 3 stages of our evolution, which when I read it, and over time, of course, I write it in the book, but I think about it a lot. The first stage, we are just going about it, like, okay,
right. And
the second stage, we are identifying with it. We are thinking, I've got to beat this. If I have a story about I'm a failure, I want to change it, I want to become a success, I want to prove everyone wrong, and that's all going on in the second stage. And in the third stage, I come into the place where which is what you just mentioned. And that third stage, in Sanskrit, it is called sattva. And sattva comes from the word sat. And sat in Sanskrit means the truth. You see?
Right.
So we go from ignorance to control to truth. And in that truth stage, I begin to realize I may or may not ever succeed the way my ego would like me to, but I'm not defined by either success or failure.
Right. But don't you think also, too, people really, we're kind of still being on that bridge, I think of it as the bridge between the human and the spiritual self. It's because we're really living both. So we really still are stuck with the stories of life. Like, we can have this conversation, but we may get up and go out and start our car and it doesn't work. We may turn around and go to the store and everything will fall apart. We may turn around and someone will get hurt or whatever,
Absolutely. So it's not as if we can say, I don't need that,
Right.
I don't need to succeed. After all, I'm spirit. That's not the point of the inner work, but to understand the way I, often teach and mention is that, you can't go shopping on an empty stomach. Because if you go grocery shopping on an empty stomach, you're going to buy all kinds of things which you don't need, which are unhealthy. I think it's the same. I use that metaphor for, unless you get in touch with, this is not who I really am. Who I am is spirit. I am fullness. I am love. I am consciousness. And then you go out into the world. You may succeed. You may not succeed. You can give it your 100%, and you are not going to be so attached to the outcome.
Right.
Because you have already taken a snack before you left for your grocery shopping.
Right.
You're not coming from emptiness, but fullness.
Yeah, I think the idea of always fixing or getting better or climbing the ladder, those concepts have all been entrenched in us. I'm almost 70. I'm sure you're older. All of us have heard those stories in the past. It has been what our ancestors had to share it and say, you need to do this because this is what we did. In other words, they're kind of like, here's my wisdom, I'm giving it to you. But we're saying, I hear your wisdom, I honor it and respect it, and have deep reverence for your passage. But also, too, I have deep honor and reverence for my moment in this time. I always look at it, we always think about ourselves and our own story of today. But if we could truly, and this is like, I read your book and I sat back, set my hand on the book, and I stepped back and I said, but everybody is doing their part in its own divine time, because it's the essence of the source energy that we are really working with. We aren't doing it just for the us.
No.
You know, we always think, oh, well, if I get this all together, then I'm an enlightened spirit, I'm this, I'm that, I'm doing this great work. When in essence, you're just toning and tuning the color of the matrix.
Yes, absolutely. You know, that integration of, yes, we are all different, and we are all going to do the inner work differently, you know, and also that concept of interbeing, we are also deeply connected. So I might do it my way, but when I do the work, even though I do it differently from you, I benefit you as much as I benefit myself, because ultimately we are all swimming in the same waters.
When you share in your book, you share about your story with your mother, your interaction with your mother, but you also, too, share about her stories and her comments. And one I drew a line under, it says, a waste of precious time. We've all heard these things. But if we think about it, perhaps, let's step back and be your mother for a moment. Yeah. Your mother perhaps believed that by the age of 60 they were going to die because their life was short. They did not know that there was anything else that they could do once their husband was gone, or once their life had changed, or once they stopped working. Because if we step back into her grandmother, and let's think about her grandmother, how she was. She probably never had a job because in the early 1900s, many people were very illiterate. Many people didn't have the resources. They didn't finish school. They weren't able to go out and do this, that, or the other. They didn't have a thought. They needed a guru and a guide. Then in your mother's generation, she was learning how to put those together, what the guru and the guide said, and learned how to read books. Now we are out with the internet and we are saying, oh, look at all this other information. And what you and I are suggesting is step even further beyond that. That's the place we're sharing. Perhaps?
Yeah. Well, in my mother's case, you know, she worked till she died. You know, she died at 80, and she was working till she died, till a few months before she passed away. But her point was that she was so completely a doer, a fixer, that she felt that all of life was supposed to be oriented around doing on the outside. And so, and she did great things. She touched many lives, and I was in awe of her when she was alive, and I'm still in awe of her in many ways. But what her blind spot was the inner work. You see, the inner world. And I remember even as a little girl, you know, sometimes I remember one particular day I was sitting on the windowsill. It was raining. You know, the monsoons in India are so beautiful, and there was a little wet crow that was sitting on the windowsill, and I was watching that, and then there was something. And my mother had gone out grocery shopping, and when she left, I was sitting on the windowsill. She came back an hour and a half later. I was still sitting there. And I remember how upset she was that I had wasted an hour and a half just looking at the rain.
Right.
But and at that time I remember feeling terribly guilty and ashamed and upset that I had wasted my time because I didn't know any other way of looking at the world except through her lens, and internalizing the judgment that she made about me. And it was not until many years later, which is the time that I'm writing this book, that I finally begged to differ, you know, finally realized that in my way of living life, what mattered was really those deep connections I made with every drop of rain that was falling from the skies. That's just who I am. And I have to appreciate that without her, I could never have become a student. You know, I studied, I became a CPA. I wouldn't have done anything without her because I would just be sitting and watching the rain, you know. So this integration that I felt I needed to do, which is what the book is about, the integration between what I am and what another person is, even though that person's way of being takes me out of my comfort zone, that person also brings something into my life.
I also, too, when you shared about that story with my own mother, I was never allowed to sit down, ever. You would be, it's the same thing, wasting time. And I remember her book, it came out, I think, in the 70s, and the book was I'm Dancing as Fast as I Can. And it was about, trying to run away from that which is hard in your life, addiction, abuse, or violence. And my mother pretty much lived her life that way and pushed that on me, that you need to run as fast as you can. If something catches up with you, that no way, And don't you think that perhaps many people, women and men, have had those experiences where they have felt that people said, keep going. This whole idea of keep going. When people say keep going, it goes to my head. I say, what am I running from? And then my answer is, I'm not going to keep going anything. I'm going to sit in it, and I'm going to feel every single essence of this pain. I'm going to know every single essence of this disease. I'm going to go down all the journey of all the harshness. Because then when I see and feel it, I'll say, but I'm more than this. This is just my experience in the moment. I am more than this. And that's what I share with my patients at end of life, is that you are more than everything. Perhaps? Yeah,
absolutely. And, I'm also thinking about multi-generational evolution, My mother's mother, she did have a lot of struggles because she was very smart, very accomplished, but she didn't have an independent source of income. She depended on her husband. Then we come to my mother, who made a career for herself and worked, and I think she wanted to undo her mother's past,
Right.
And so that's that second stage that the Gita talks about. In the first stage, you're just suffering. In the second stage, you're fixing. And I think that these stages can span generations,
Yes.
And so my mother was the fixer, and she created a career. And like I said to you earlier, she was working right till she died, and she never was financially in need because she got that. That was her thing. And then we come to my generation, and my thinking, gosh, Mom, you've been running and running.
Yes.
And I don't want to live like that. And I think that I could do this because she did that. And it takes a certain path of evolution, where you can come to a place where you are now. I was never worried about money, because you know what? My mother had taken care of that. You see, she had outgrown that fear through her work, and that's the gift that she gave me. Now, I have to give the gift to my children. And what's the gift I want to give my children? And that is, like you said, there is so much more to life than this. You are so much more than what you think you are.
Right.
And that's the gift that's my, gift to bequeath to my children, that consciousness.
Yeah. I think what we forget, and I think so many people forget, just as you share in your book, you said, take me or leave me as I am. I think that is so vitally important, is to say, have reverence for others and their past. I mean, it has been, I see this in the spiritual community left and right these days. People are cutting cords, they're dishonoring people, they're letting people go, whatever, and they're not having reverence for the others.
Dr. Jeanette, you're speaking, right? You just said something that's so dear to my heart, because this is what I have also been noticing. People call themselves, their brand of spirituality allows them to cut off and have a kind of a superiority without really seeing and having compassion for another person and teaching oneself how to engage. You've got to teach yourself to engage in a way that upholds your humanity and theirs.
Right. Yeah. But also, too, don't you think we need to also focus on the concept of guilt and shame, or taking on someone else's story, or walking in someone else's life? Because I know for myself, when I do sessions with people, they will say, well, okay, so are you going to, how does this work? Are you going to tell me stuff? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to jump your body and tell you your story or where I think you're going to go. That's not what it's about. It's about stepping back and just being the light that might shine through the door, and then they will find it on their own. I think truly in your book, The Yoga of Self-Love, is truly not about saying, this is the way to do it, this is all the guideposts, and make sure you don't make a mistake along the way because you'll miss it. Many gurus, even the word, we see this word out there all the time, coaching. And I'm like, and everybody says, well, are you a coach? And I'll say, no, I'm not going to tell you what to do, stand on the sidelines and rah-rah when you do it. It has nothing to do with that. It's about opening awareness so that you can see your own self, perhaps?
So true, so true. And yes, I totally agree with you. And it's like, what is this brand of spirituality or faith or whatever that gives you a should and then makes you feel guilty when you don't meet that should?
Yes.
You see?
Yes.
And I think many people, I have had these conversations with many of my students, they say, but I thought that that's what it means to be responsible. And so
right.
I talk about this in the book, that the distinction between taking responsibility and taking guilt and shame, they are two different, it's like a fork in the road. You cannot do both. To take responsibility is to say, I could have made a better choice, and to be curious about where that came from and to kind of course correct based on what you now know. That has nothing to do with guilt and shame. That's not taking responsibility, but so many people think I should be guilty because that's what a responsible person does.
Right. I liken it to the path that I always say, going back to what I said before about when you intersect, with your lineage and you're brought into this world as human. I always say it's like jumping into a wetsuit. And your wetsuit is your human body, And when you go through life, you get all these badges on you. You get to be a mother, a daughter, a father, brother, sister. You get to have your jobs and your professions. You get to have your diseases. You get to have things that happen to you. And those are all badges, stuck to this wetsuit.
Yeah.
And every time that ball of glitter inside that wetsuit engages with another, you're looking through all of these badges. So all of these are filters how you see the world.
Yeah.
And I think really what you and I are talking about today is with the awakening, with Soul Journey, with our lighting up our soul, I say we always look for the cracks through the wetsuit, and that's how you expand your consciousness. And, a lot of times people in the spiritual community these days, they're saying, open up your 8th chakra and the light will come into you. And I'll say, no, it's in your inside already. It's your ball of glitter. You just need to find the crack to let it to shine out. Perhaps?
So true. So true. You're talking about the wetsuit. And what I was thinking was, I love the analogy of a wetsuit because, let's look at the wetsuit, right? Nothing really sticks to the wetsuit,
Right.
But for many of us, and I remember having this conversation in one of my classes, and many of us, our wetsuits are made of Velcro. So what happens when your wetsuit is made of Velcro? Yeah. Everything that people throw at you sticks to you. You see? But when we start to say, what? No. The very texture of your wetsuit needs to change. The very fabric of your wetsuit, which is your sense of self as you move through the earth. Your sense of self is your wetsuit as you move through your earthly experiences. But some of us, by mistake, because we didn't know any better, we have a wetsuit made of Velcro, and we might need to say, I don't want to do that anymore. I need a sense of self that is strong and protective and that lets things slide. I'm going to walk free of all the baggage that I tend to collect, or taking everything personally, making it all part of my identity. And I think the whole journey is about coming to that awareness of the Velcro, excuse me, and saying, no, I think I need a new wetsuit. And that wetsuit is one that's going to give me flexibility, it's going to give me agility, and it's going to give me a wonderful way of swimming through the experience as lightly as possible.
Right. Because you shared in your book, you said a compassionate, supportive, and integrated being. When I wrote on the page, I wrote, devoid of labels, yes. All are dots on the continuum of source energy. So really, truly, what you and I are talking about is in this moment in time, 2024, you and I and many who have been on this journey in a long time are starting to share the concept of, can we be devoid of the labels?
Yeah.
So in essence,
yes.
we think about it. Can we say, I'm not your daughter. I am a person, a soul being. I see my place in the world. However, can we engage in a different way? And that's very much, people will say, but no, you are my this. You are your this. All of those pronouns of possession, so to speak, have to go away. Even when I share, with patients at the end of life, they will say, I'll say, why are you still hanging around? Why aren't you leaving this world? And they'll say, because, and as soon as they hear the word because, they just stop. And it doesn't matter what comes after it. And I say, but honey, when you go through the door, this story will just drop like ashes on the ground. It'll be gone. And it doesn't matter. And then they be free and they'll pass the next day or whatever. Yeah. So are we not proposing the idea of, can we let go of some of the labels? Can we let some of the story drop like ash and help each other find that path?
I think that, we can't do it on our deathbed if we haven't done it during our lifetime, It's like a training throughout our life of how can I love without attachment, right? How can I own a relationship without possessing it? So these are questions, reflections, and choices that we have to make throughout our life, so that when that grand finale moment of death comes, we are able to move through it and really expand our awareness into what is possible, instead of shrinking back in fear and attachment and wanting to hold on to these limiting identities. But it really takes a work of a lifetime, almost like I was just finished teaching a class before this month, and I was telling people that, you can't take summers off, you can't take winters off. You have to work on this 365 days of a year, because we are so addicted to our concepts, we are so addicted to our beliefs. If a person is going to AA, they cannot say that, in the summer I'm going to not go to AA, I'm just going to drink and have fun and then I'll join back the meetings, because it doesn't work that way. You have, I said, we are like those addicts, except our addictions are different. We cannot afford to take a day off.
Do you think perhaps, for myself, I've already shared with those important to me that there'll be no calls to other people when I pass. There will be no obituary written. There will be no marker that I was left on the earth. Just my ashes will fall and be part of the collective. And I share that so many times with people, and they say, but... And I say, but that but is your story. And I think also, too, I have had so many end-of-life, we call near-death experiences myself personally. Even in the past year, I was so ill. I mean, I had so many I can't even count. I mean, and I just call it as we transition to the other side. We have a conversation. We think about it. And we say, do I want to come back or not? And then we decide, do we come back or not? Just as you shared in your book about dreams, that is in essence too where our spirit will have a conversation with our energetic soul essence, and it will say, do I want to go back into this, that, or the other? There are many examples in our life we have floated beyond and between these dimensions if we are aware of what the story might look like. What I'm sharing today is this is what the story may look like, perhaps?
Yeah, this is, you talk about passing and moving on, and I want to talk about what you said because I was wondering about that, and I was asking myself, you said just to have leaving no stories behind, just allowing the ashes to merge with the earth and not leaving anything for those who love us to kind of have a touchstone. I don't know how I feel about that because at this time, of course, I still have hopefully some more years to think about that. But I wonder whether it would be something to leave behind for, like, when I go to see, even last week, a bunch of us, a very close person from our Sangha, she was beloved and she passed away from cancer a couple of years ago. And a bunch of us, we just went and sat by her grave, and we felt her presence. We just felt so much love. I almost felt like I felt her embrace around me. I felt like she just came and she gave me a big hug. And it helped me to come back and lead my life in a little more, it just helped me. So I wonder whether that would be not something as a gift to leave someone. It's not my story. It's a gift, a place, a sanctuary to leave. Not that I need it, but for anyone who might want to, because ultimately, if you look at it, right, if you look at it from the non-dualistic perspective, there is no coming and going, There's no coming and going. We're all the time, everywhere, at the same time.
Yep.
So, so there is no coming and going. And I think that when we talk about moksha, self-realization, I think it is that breaking down of the wall that separates our identity as a separate thing versus being one with everything all the time.
Right. Do you think, in closing, we can just touch on this for a second? Because really what you're using with it, when you go to visit a grave or you go to visit a story or something that someone left behind you might hold dearly, truly what you're doing is you're holding on to and opening up a portal to be able to engage with their spirit or their soul. And if we think about, we say, do we need markers to do that? Yes, humans may still need to do that. Some people don't need to do that. For myself, I don't need those markers because I sense and have that connection very highly and deeply. It's been ingrained my whole life in that spiritual side. But I think what you and I are sharing is how do we come from the rigid story of just human story to be able to progress along this path. So, wow. I'm not provoking to say... Yeah, I'm not provoking to say that we don't have those, we don't have bury someone or we don't leave behind their story or have a funeral. What I'm saying is there are options out there, and eventually that will wax and wane over the time, perhaps.
Right. No, I'm thinking, Dr. Jeanette, you may not need that, but people who love you might need that. And it may not be necessarily a grave. Yeah, it could be, I often walk in the park near where I live, and many of the benches there have a name,
Yeah.
And sometimes there's a tree that is planted. And it may not be for the person who has passed as much as it is for the living, who continue, that they come there. Because the people who are living still are people in form. You see, you still have a form. And because you have a form, and this again is such a larger conversation about, how in the East we have so many gods and goddesses and idols and all of that. And then I was for a year in Israel and I saw how the the Judaic traditions, they don't believe in idol worship. They don't have a form. And I kind of, coming from the culture I come from, I was like, this is so interesting. And over the years, I have kind of grappled with that question and realized, both are right. Both are right. God is formless, and at the same time, but I have form. And I need, if nothing, a menorah, a cross, ultimately human beings do need some form because we are in form. You see? So it's so much. So such interesting conversations.
Yes, very much so. I think back onto when I was very little. We had a cemetery next door, and I always would go over there to play because I spoke with the souls all the time. When I used to jog, when I would jog, in my earlier decades, I always went to the cemetery. That's where I did my jogging every day. It just was me because I was always in touch with that other side. So in essence, truly, I think in closing, when we say the story of when we were really finding self-love, I think we're really finding self-love through the collective, and eventually we realize that it's collective love that we're all looking for, that connection. Yeah. And that's how we can see how the pieces fit together in the matrix or in that mirage of that picture, don't you think?
Absolutely. I love that expression of how the pieces fit together. I love that because that's a great image, a great analogy, like a jigsaw puzzle piece. We are like 4 billion pieces, and each one of us is separate and different, but the image would be incomplete without each one of us being exactly the way we were meant to be.
Yes. It's so interesting, when you look at a picture of the universe, when they share them on the internet, you go, wow, I'm just a little bit glimmer of that light. And isn't that awesome, right?
Yes, and yet the world would be incomplete without you being you in it.
Yeah. And then you can turn back in your day and says, you know what? It doesn't matter a hill of beans if I dropped the milk or if I didn't clean my kitchen or if my car is broke down. It doesn't matter.
Really,
and I think you find yourself eventually saying, I don't need those stories anymore, and that's what we're talking about. Don't you think?
Absolutely. I do think so. I think that ultimately, we go from a bad, so there's a great teacher in India, he said, when you have a thorn that's stuck in your flesh, you take one thorn to pick up the first thorn, and then you throw both the thorns away, Our stories are like that. First I have a horrible story, and then I have a better story to take, but eventually I want to toss off both the stories.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Well, it was such a pleasure to have you with us here today, Ramaa. I think that the idea is that can we live a guided life and just say, let's have these stories. And what you and I share today are experience, our stories, and some guidance. So we thank you so much for joining us today to share that.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Jeanette, for giving me an opportunity. It was such a pleasure talking to you, and I think we covered so many things in our conversation.
Did. Yes. Can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work?
Oh, thank you for asking. And yes, my website is called fullbloomedlotus.com. So through that, you will know more about my work. I lead retreats. I have classes on Zoom and in person. And, of course, my book, The Yoga of Self-Love, is available on Amazon, and that has a lot of teachings and exercises for people to do the inner work.
Very good. It was such a pleasure to have you with us here today, Ramaa. And I think that perhaps maybe as our time expands, you'll be able to join us another time, and we'll share about your next level of consciousness, correct?
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Very good. If you'd like to find out more information about Ramaa Krishnan, again, the book is The Yoga of Self-Love, The Sacred Path to Wholeness and Healing Through Inner Child Work. Please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to her website for more information. And it is about saying no matter where you are today, if you are stuck, if you are hurting, if you are moving, if you are flying, if you are feeling like you don't have any answers, or perhaps you're just laying down on the ground and saying, just take me away. The answers will come, the moment will come, and we will be able to say the shift in energy is always there. Just open up to it. Accept where you are today and say, this is awesome. I'm stumbling. Ooh, this is cool. What is it all about? And share with others your story and expression. That's how we'll be able to grow and move through this time. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit drjeanettegallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.